Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys been enjoying the content on the channel as of late. Funny story actually with this video. I had recorded this video I think like a few days ago, and for some odd reason when I was trying to record the video I did regarding the recent changes with tariffs and the reductions and Hollywood imports that China has just put in place. For some odd reason, I lost this video, so I'm just now re-recording it. So I'll try to keep it short and sweet, just because there's not much that I really can say outside of just literally the video itself as it's titled. Um, but um, So, of course, we heard I think last week, or no, 2 weeks ago now at this point, we got an idea of sorts of the cast for Avengers Doomsday. And we also know that filming is underway in London right now, and likely we're probably going to hear some other casting announcements probably in the next coming months or so. Um, but at stands, we have a decent idea as to who's going to be in the film. Obviously, more players will be involved in the future in the next film, Secret Wars. But now, this is rather ironic for this video, because I don't necessarily care to watch the film. I just don't, because I don't care for where Marvel has been going lately for the past couple of years. And superhero-wise, I've just been really fatigued and really exhausted. So, frankly, I just don't really care to actually see the film. But given the history with this film, given the fact that they were supposed to go in a different direction with Jonathan Majors, and then that fell apart because of all the legal troubles that transpired there, and then now having to redirect to doing this with Robert Downey Jr., it got me wondering, what are they going to do, and how are they going to make this work, and how is this going to transition into the next phase, as you will, of the MCU, and what does that look like? So I figured I would throw out a little bit of a pitch, just for funsies, just because it just got my mind going, and I put out my own little predictions as to what I believe is going to be happening with this film, potentially story wise, and just for archive's sake, just in case I maybe hit some right notes, or if I'm completely off base, who knows, But this is what I would like to see, at least in terms of making this function within the MCU and ultimately justifying its existence, because it's rather difficult right now to justify the existence of this specific film in the form that it is taking. With Jonathan Majors and with things happen there, it's just caused a massive shakeup, of having to make this film function. And it appears so that's going to be pretty standalone. And as I think I heard in an interview, or saw with an interview with the Russos, this is a beginning chapter, as they're calling it. So I am going to throw out my little pitch, what I think would be an interesting layout of the story for this film. And I'm centralizing it specifically on the character of Doctor Doom, what that all means, why Robert Downey Jr. is playing it, so this is my personal guess. So here's what I think is going to happen, or at least my idea of sorts of what I would like to see happen in this film. So, given just the parameters of what we have with Robert Downey Jr. and probably rolling out with some kind of reboot. So here's what I want. So this story is actually going to start at the end of Infinity War. Now, at the end of Infinity War, obviously, we saw Thanos snap his fingers, and as a result, half of the universe turned into dust. And many notable characters, of course, faded into dust. Black Panther, Winter Soldier, a couple of the Guardians here and there passed on. But the most notable death, specifically in regards to Tony Stark, is, of course, that of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. And his death actually would help motivate Tony Stark when we get to the events of Endgame. It would actually help motivate him to create a functional time machine to help save his universe, and then ultimately leading to his own sacrifice at the very end. In another universe, though, the same events transpire, they unfold, but the reactions are where the timelines diverge, because keep in mind, this whole new phase has been about multiverses, different dimensions, different timelines, and with that, there are different outcomes to the same events or similar events that we have been privy to in the MCU, and that's how we get all these branches and stuff like that. So in another universe or another timeline, I guess to be specific, after Peter Parker passes on, the man that we know to be Tony Stark, he actually is lost. He, metaphorically speaking, is lost as well. His hopefulness, his eagerness, his determination, all that has been replaced now with a strong sense of anger and bitterness. And eventually they make their way back to Earth, same way as they do in Endgame. It's Tony Stark and Nebula. They find their ways back to Earth, where the remaining Avengers are, and similar events also transpire with Tony just so crippled and skinny, and he eventually has an argument with Captain America regards to how things could have happened. It could have helped if they had done, basically, we're following up to where they were in Civil War. They're at odds with each other, and then he passes out, right? Just to add this in, because I completely forgot to bring this up. In relation to Thanos, how I would deal with Thanos within this timeline, there's two options that you can take, at least by how we're trying to build up this version of Tony. I think that there's two ways you can go about it. You can go either the route of Thanos, they do the exact same things that happen in Endgame. Thor lobs off his head, and the Avengers, dismantle. They all go their separate ways. They all deal with their own grief and sorrow throughout the events of Endgame. They try to create some time travel device, but it doesn't work, and it still will not work in this universe because of the absence of Tony Stark. So that's one way you can go about it. The other way you can go about it, I think, could be rather interesting, in that Tony Stark himself could actually be what kills Thanos. It's not Thor, it would actually be Tony. So that has to be some little rewrites, in terms of how I'm pitching this so far in the video. But that's how I would deal with Thanos, just because I'm just about to edit this, and I actually proposed this to my bro just because we were just shooting the shit, and I was just like, here's what I thought. And he was like, well, how do you deal with Thanos? And I was like, oh, that's true. So those would be the two ways I would kind of deal with it. Either, Thanos reigns supreme, or what happens with Thanos at the hands of Thor actually ends up at the hands of Iron Man. So those are my ideas how to deal with Thanos. But let's continue. But when he awakens, we don't get the loving father type that we eventually see many years later. What happens at this point is that he has actually succumbed to his anger, and he begins to work independently from others. So in his head, the reason for why he wishes to do so, because, Tony also has a stubbornness to him. So when he, thinks a certain way, there's little room in some respects for that ego to get popped, unless it's pretty significant, and he then considers that other side. Hence was like Civil War to some extent, where he has like this very, very specific viewpoint, until eventually something quite drastic comes to his view that presents him with another line of thinking, seeing that his flaw within his logic. But in this case, there is no massive, indication. So he is succumbing to his view, his perspective that he has gained, and his rationale within the distance that he is building within people is that it affords a better opportunity for others to live off a better life, because he is taking the blame, he is taking on that guilt for losing Peter Parker. and he doesn't want that to become, he doesn't want that sort of outcome to happen to anybody again. So he decides to break off, relationships with his wife and with his daughter, who eventually came into the world, and he is not wanting to become too attached to anyone again, in fearing of straight up just losing them. So through that distance, it provides him a lot of focus to defend, in his eyes, those he cares about. And by doing that, he actually uses the same thing about using a time machine, and he actually starts to look for any potential threats that could come to his universe. So he then develops a theory about the multiverse and about any incoming threats to his universe. He engineers a universe hopping device very similar to that of the time machine, but this time it's more expansive, thanks to both a combination of both mystic and scientific research. So Doctor Strange and Bruce Banner, kind of talking to them, but kind of giving at least not Doctor Strange. It'd be Juan, I guess, in this instance, because Doctor Strange was dusted. So, but through that, he gets he gets the tools that he needs to build this device, and he begins an endeavor to wipe the multiverse of any potential threats that could bring harm or death to those he loves. And he then creates a new suit of armor to match his newfound persona, and he begins in secret to a crusade to wipe out all threats. So no one else is really knowing of what Tony is doing. A few people perhaps has some thoughts, but they're not certain. They think that maybe Tony is grieving, or maybe they're doing something that perhaps can help them in larger ways. But because in this universe, they're not able to reverse what had happened. They're not able to do what they did in Endgame. Through specifics, they can't do what they did in Endgame. Hence why there is more grief, running rampant, and more of a willingness to try things that perhaps they wouldn't do because of just the consequences of trying these ideas or flirting with these ideas and becoming perhaps a little evil and a little bit ignorant yourself, But he begins this crusade in secret, hence Secret Wars, and his endeavor begins to corrupt him as he seeks out any person that he deems unworthy to live, because it's no longer that they're a threat. It's now, do I believe that you are worth being around? And years of violence take a toll on him, and he becomes a cruel man with the smallest possibility of the gentleman still buried underneath. But through his tyranny, through all of this violence, he starts to develop a reputation of sorts through the multiverse, and he gets the name from his level of carnage, from his level of brutality. That's where he gets the name Dr. Doom, and he adopts that persona and he adopts that name, and hence Dr. Doom is born, and he is on his mission to rid the universe of all threats, as it were, at least in his mind. And for me, I don't want this to be a story of just an evil man. That's not what I want. And I think that the idea of having Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, I think that it's not by pure coincidence. Clearly it's a Hail Mary. We all know this, but for story purposes, I don't think that that's the case. I think that there's a fundamental reason to why they casted Robert Downey Jr. And I think it is to kind of do a reverse of sorts on the idea of Tony Stark, and in how integral Tony Stark is to the to the MCU, and ultimately what his sacrifice means for the greater, for his own universe. The personality of sorts and just the overall journey that he takes can be kind of in some ways reflective to that of Darth Vader. And I think that that's ultimately where I would want this story to go, because we know that eventually, Spider-Man is going to appear in these movies. And obviously with seeing Tony's face on Doctor Doom, there's obviously going to be some kind of confrontation between the two. So I would think that this dynamic would be that reflective of that of Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, where Doctor Doom is a tragic character, and Spider-Man is the person that is going to bring him back to the light. And in doing so, we have, in some ways, a reincarnation of Iron Man. And that's how you get Robert Downey Jr. as the true Tony Stark back. But for a temporary thing, I don't think it's going to be a long term. I don't think that there's going to be like having Robert Downey Jr. do a bunch of movies afterwards. I think this is just an offshoot, and it's just a way to get two birds in one stone. Robert Downey Jr. to do something different, but also something familiar at the same time. And I think that in that, you get a story that feeds to to Infinity War. It also feeds to the kind of that TV show What If. It kind of gives you a what if scenario, where I think this actually feels a lot more in line, especially when you understand the character of Tony Stark. His journey as a character is less about himself and more about others and his love for others. And what would happen when that drive leads to the death of someone? What happens to him in that respect? In Endgame, he pushes forward with the people that he has, where in this version he pushes away in fear of losing those people. So, and that's what creates the persona that he adopts in the story, and ultimately is that of a Darth Vader. Through the slaughtering of people, he just becomes more and more sinister, and what starts out with good intentions ends in tragedy. But perhaps there is hope, with a new hope, if you will, in the form of Peter Parker when he returns, and perhaps is able to, with seeing the face that which he lost, perhaps there is something there that he can hold on to and bring him back of sorts to the man that we all know and love. So that's what I would think that they could do. I think that's an interesting idea, because you get two things in one, and I think that you also get an interesting story to go with it. I don't know if they're going to be that clever. I think that they're just going to do just Doctor Doom, and it's just going to wear the face of Tony Stark, but I would hope that there's a little bit more to it. I think that my hope is that there is, because it just feels odd to have Robert Downey Jr. in this setting. If it really is just a Hail Mary, okay, but I think that there is more. I really do believe there's more beyond that with that casting, and a story like this I feel like would be more justified, and I feel like a little bit more interesting, but it still creates a lot of plot holes. I acknowledge it. it just comes completely out of nowhere, but in just of how this series of movies so far of phase 4 and phase 5, it definitely feels out of place. But in terms of just functionality to this specific story, I think it could be interesting. I think so. But then again, I thought of it so clear. So, but you guys let me know. What do you guys think of that? Do you guys think that's interesting, or do you guys think that that's just ridiculous? Let me know. Let me know your thoughts. What do you guys think is going to happen in Doomsday? Do you guys think they're going to pull an Infinity War with this, where the Avengers lose and then they go to Secret Wars? Probably. It seems kind of repetitive, but let me know. What are your anticipations for Doomsday? What do you want to see happen in Doomsday? What are your thoughts on how they're going to explain the Doctor Doom aspects? Let me know. Just decide to just throw out a pitch just for funsies, just for fun. Like I said, I have really no care to see the movie, but I was curious enough to think, what are they going to do with Robert Downey Jr. and how they're going to explain that. That's my little pitch, my little guess to what I think they're going to do. But let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.